All right, how you doing? This is COM-225 video 4. The communication scholar Joseph DeVito says this: as you move up the hierarchy in your business and professional lives, you will find an even greater need for effective public speaking. Robert Lane Greene, who wrote a great book called You Are What You Speak. It's a book about rhetoric. I love this book. I've read it a couple of times. He says, speech is jazz. Speech is jazz. First you learn the basics, then you learn how to improvise. So first you learn the 6-step guide, then you learn how to improvise, and you can be more free-flowing with your speeches. I'll just tell you that I love public speaking. I do it for a living pretty much. We talked about how most people's greatest fear in life is public speaking. My greatest fear in life is that they won't let me speak in public, honestly. I really enjoy it. So one of the things we need to understand about our anxiety about public speaking, why it's so scary to us, is that we actually do a lot of public speaking all day long when we're with other people. We just don't realize that it's public speaking. If you're a food server, you do public speaking all the time to audiences that you don't know, that you've never met. That's a form of public speaking, being able to tell them about the specials and take their orders. It's a form of public speaking. If you're working in a sales job, when you're selling to somebody, that's a form of public speaking. If you're responding to a customer's objections, that's a form of public speaking. If you're going to be an attorney or a doctor, you better figure out how to do public speaking, because you're going to have to talk to families, you're going to have to talk to patients, you're going to have to talk to clients. You may be in court, you may be a litigator. You need to figure out the public speaking. Here's a great opportunity, my opinion, to practice impromptu public speaking. How many of you have ever been pulled over by a police officer? That is a wonderful opportunity to practice impromptu public speaking. I've been pulled over in my life maybe 8 times total, not very often. And I've only gotten 2 tickets by being pulled over by a police officer. I've also gotten 2 photo radar tickets. Anyway, I think the reason I've only gotten 2 by being pulled over is because I know how to behave with the police officer when he pulls me over and when he approaches the car and when he wants to talk to me, or she. There's a way of being able to speak to the officer that will put them at ease and help you get a warning rather than the ticket, but it's a great opportunity for public speaking. The bottom line is that public speaking is our friend. Here you go. Research shows that the average 3-day retention of an audience member who experienced a public speaking event, let's say a political speech, 3 days later, on average, that person can remember 2% of that speech, just 2%. In 72 hours, they've forgotten about 98% of that content. That's troubling. A big part of the reason for that is the lack of organization, the lack of audience analysis, and the lack of a person's ability to communicate well through the public forum. And so through this class, my goal and my hope is that you could get that to 10%. If your audiences remembered 10% of your material 3 days after you spoke to them, that's a huge advantage in the marketplace. It's a tremendous advantage in the marketplace. So that's what one of the things we're trying to do here. The scholar Dwayne Lifton says this: the best way to improve public speaking is to speak at every opportunity. Every chance you get to speak, you should take it, for practice will only make you better and less anxious. When I was first getting into public speaking, somebody would walk up to me and say, "Hey, would you be able to?" And I go, "Yes." They didn't even have to tell me what the event was, when the event was, whether it's going to be paid or not. Didn't matter. None of that mattered. I would rearrange my schedule to be able to do that public speaking event because I wanted to get better at public speaking. It's very important. That's the philosophy behind something called Toastmasters. Have any of you ever heard of Toastmasters? Toastmasters is, here's the philosophy behind Toastmasters. the founders of Toastmasters 50 years ago understand that sooner or later, every person sooner or later will be asked to give a toast at a dinner, at a wedding reception, at a funeral reception, whatever it is. You'll be asked to give a toast. And Toastmasters is trying to train you to be ready for that moment when you have to stand up in front of people and say something coherent. So Toastmasters is an international association of about 4,000 local speech clubs. People join Toastmasters and go to the meetings every week for 90 minutes in order to get better at public speaking. And you'll speak every 6 to 8 weeks in a Toastmasters club, and you'll be evaluated, and you have certain assignments that you have to do, and you pay money to do this, but it's a wonderful way to get better at public speaking. I will tell you this is kind of a credibility statement. I'm trying not to brag, but I will tell you that in 1997, I was the Toastmasters national champion in humorous speaking. National champion in humorous speaking. I had been in Toastmasters by that time for about 7 years, and I'd learned a lot about public speaking, and I was getting really good at it. I decided to start entering those contests, and the way the contest works is it's once a year. They have a motivational speech and a humorous speech. I always wanted to do the humorous speech, and you work your way up from club level to area level to regional area level to state level to superintendent level to national level. You have all these levels that you have to work through. And each year I moved up a couple of levels each time. Till 1997, I actually went to nationals and won the humorous speaking contest. By the way, just a little side note. In 1996, the championships for Toastmasters were held in Chicago. I lived in Chicago in my early 20s for 5 years. I'm born and raised in Phoenix, but moved to Chicago when I was 20 and moved out when I was 25. And I will just tell you, I loved my 5 years in Chicago. I love the city of Chicago. I think it's a great city. Probably wouldn't live there now. I'm a little more averse to the cold and the traffic, but I loved living there back in the 80s and in my 20s. It was wonderful. In 1996, that's where they held the Toastmaster Championships. I missed out on Chicago. In 1998, the year after I went to nationals, they held nationals in Miami, another great city that I've never been to, probably never will be able to go to, but I would have liked to have gone to Miami. My wife Jackie's been to Miami. She says it's a great city. She's been there for volleyball tournaments. I missed out on getting to go to Miami. 1997, where did they hold the Toastmaster Championships? Are you ready? Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yes, I got to go to Tulsa. That was the downside of being able to do the nationals there. So, some tips and thoughts about how to do public speaking better. Number one, the benefits of public speaking is that it will improve your personal and social abilities, and it will improve your academic and career possibilities. So, public speaking, the benefits, it will improve your personal and social abilities, and it will improve your academic and career possibilities. By the way, everything that we're going through now, you should be taking notes, because this is a lot of the stuff that's going to end up on your first quiz. Let me stop here and tell you about your second quiz. If you go into the announcements section on Canvas, you will see 6 announcements that are already in there. You should read all 6 announcements. They're all very helpful. We already looked at one of them. That's the handy short form of the 6-step guide for your speeches. But the first announcement that pops up is quiz number 2 info. And this quiz is due Wednesday, September 17th. And this quiz just simply gives you the information you need to be able to complete quiz 2, at least the first part of it. The quiz 2, the first part of it is matching. You have 11 rhetorical devices that you need to understand how to use them. So you have things like alliteration, antithesis, hyperbole, irony, metaphor, simile, metonymy, oxymoron, and on and on and on. So that's where you get your information for quiz number 2, is in the announcements. What I'm covering now is mostly information for quiz number 1, okay? So let's continue. Benefits of public speaking. Next, we'll talk about apprehension in public speaking, or stage fright, or speaker anxiety. We'll get to that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the 3 Ps of effective public speaking. We have the 6-step guide to effective public speaking. These are the 3 Ps of effective public speaking. Number 1, plan. I've already asked you in one of your assignments to tell me about some of the speech topics you're thinking about. Planning is sort of that large overview. You're planning in your mind, what do I want to talk about? Where would I go for information about that? How would I connect it to the audience? Why will this be interesting? Why is it interesting to me? You're thinking in big macro terms when you're planning. Then you have to prepare. Now you're doing your research, you're gathering your content, you're putting together your content, you're organizing your content, and you're writing your rough draft. So you have it all organized, you have all your content. This is the meatiest part of getting ready to give a speech. Now, a lot of people, I already mentioned this in one of the other videos. A lot of people think if they do well in planning and preparing, they don't need to do number 3. That is one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is that you don't need to do number 3. You need to do number 3, practice. And you need to practice out loud. And I've already talked about this, but you need to practice out loud so that you can time your speech and make sure you're within the time constraints, and so that you can hear what the speech sounds like orally and wordsmith your speech to make improvements. So the 3 Ps of good public speaking: plan, prepare, and practice. So let's talk a little bit about anxiety. The reason you get anxious is because you start thinking about the presentation and adrenaline starts flowing. If you've ever been close to being in an accident, you know that right after you slam on your brakes and the other person slams on their brakes and you see your life flash in front of you, but you don't actually collide in with somebody else, about 2 minutes later, your legs feel rubbery, you're suddenly very tired, you don't feel energetic, and you just feel kind of wobbly. That's because you had a tremendous shot of adrenaline. Adrenaline is a very important hormone. Adrenaline is our protection hormone. It's our flight or fight hormone. Our adrenaline is something that prepares us for something challenging. When you start to feel nervous about public speaking, when you are playing on a hockey team, I'm a big hockey fan. When you're on a hockey team and you're 10 minutes away from the game, you're about to take the ice, you get nervous. Super Bowl, watching the Super Bowl is interesting because that first set of downs for each team, it looks like the players are a little discombobulated. The reason is because it's the Super Bowl and they had a larger adrenaline shot flowing through their body than normal, and so they're a little bit nervous at that point. Adrenaline is normal, nervousness is normal. The trick is to make sure that you manage it well. The great public speaker, can't remember his name now. He's a great public speaker. Tony Robbins. He says, everybody has butterflies. The trick is to get them to fly into all fly in formation. So we all have that feeling of butterflies in our stomach. The trick is to get them to fly in formation. You're never going to get rid of the nervousness. You need to learn how to manage the nervousness. I used to be, in my 20s, late 20s, when I moved back to Phoenix after Chicago, I was one of the top distance runners in the state of Arizona. So I'd go and run 5Ks, 8Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. I wasn't running marathons yet. I didn't start running marathons until I was in my 40s. I was like everybody else. I didn't think it was important to ever run a marathon. Then I hit 40 and I thought I better run a marathon. Anyway, but I was running 5Ks, 8Ks, 10Ks, and half marathons. And winning some races and doing really quite well. By the way, if you're interested, the cross-country and distance running track coach at Paradise Valley Community College is a guy that I ran against in high school. And he was a great runner. We were both all-state, but he was way better than me. He actually qualified for the United States Olympic team in 1980. And I would argue that's why Paradise Valley Community College often wins the national championship in cross country. We have a really good cross country team, and it's because of Coach Barney that we do so well in that. Anyway, I was one of the best runners, but the thing I hated about it was, let's say I had a race on Saturday morning. By Thursday night, I already had butterflies in my stomach. Friday was a mess. Friday night, I had trouble sleeping. Then I get up Saturday morning and I drive to the race, and I get more and more nervous the whole time I go to a race. So this one race, it was like in October, and it was at Coronado Park in Scottsdale. It's called the Coronado 8K. It was a medium-sized race. There were maybe 1,000 people there. And when I got to the race and started running my warm-up and looking around at who else was at the race, I realized that nobody of really any substance showed up to this race. Nobody who has ever beaten me at any of those distances, 5K, 8K, 10K, half marathon, showed up to this race. I didn't realize it until later, but at that moment, as I'm running my warm-up, all my nervousness went away. And I began to think, I've finally figured out how to eliminate nervousness, that terrible feeling of nervousness. I've eliminated it. Got up to the starting line, starting gun goes off, everybody takes off, and I'm not in the lead. I'm in 6th or 7th place, and I'm struggling to stay up with the front pack. And I'm like, this is weird. I don't feel right. There's something not right here. So I kept thinking, well, I'm a big finisher. I'm a negative split guy. I always run the second half of the race faster than the first half of the race. I'm going to catch them in the end. I didn't catch them. I ended up placing 5th. I got beat by 4 people who had never beaten me before, and I ran 2 minutes slower than I normally run an 8K in. An 8K is about 5 miles. I ran 2 minutes slower than I normally run an 8K in. And I was just flummoxed. I had no idea what happened. On the way home, I began to realize I didn't have that energy that the nervousness provides through the adrenaline. It left me way too soon. It's not helpful to try to get rid of the nervousness. Now, if you're so nervous that you're throwing up, I understand that. That's a problem. That's probably not helpful. But some adrenaline is going to help you to perform better. You should learn how to manage it. One of the ways that you can manage it is through excellent planning, solid preparation, and relentless practice. Practice your speech out loud over and over and time it. We have 2 dogs at home. They're constantly sitting there watching me practice my public presentations. I have no idea what they're thinking about when they do that, but they just sit on the couch and look up at me like I'm some kind of an idiot. And I recognize how hard it is to practice something out loud when you first start doing it. It seems a little awkward, but you need to be able to do that. Something else that helps with nervousness is make sure you're careful about what you're eating and drinking up to 5 hours before you present. Be very careful about that. First of all, don't drink any alcohol. Second of all, don't take a muscle relaxer pill. I've had people say, hey, I had a bad back and they gave me these muscle relaxer pills. What do you think about taking a muscle relaxer pill before I give my speech to kind of cut down on the nervousness? Bad idea. You're under the influence of the drugs now, not your own intellect, and you're going to make all kinds of mistakes. Same thing with drinking liquor before. Also, don't drink milk or milkshakes. Don't do any dairy products because that'll unfortunately make phlegm and mucus build up in your throat, which is not helpful when you're public speaking. And don't drink carbonated beverages because you'll start burping, okay? What you need to do is be all about water. Years ago, again, I've been at PVCC a long time. Years ago, in COM-100, they have to give a persuasive speech. And at the time, this is before I rearranged the class to do the speeches in the middle of the semester instead of the end. It was the last day of class, and they were giving their persuasive speeches on the last day of class. And we had just started the persuasive speeches, and I was sitting in the back of the room. The front of the room was where the speeches were being given, and the tables were in that horseshoe shape, which you've probably seen at the school if you've taken any in-person classes. They're in that horseshoe shape. There's about 20 students in the class. There's a student up there speaking. It's the first student giving the persuasive speech. And all of a sudden to my left, I start hearing this commotion. And I look over, and there's a student, great guy, really enjoyed him in the class, but these large streams of what can only be described as fuchsia liquid and material was just coming out of his mouth. He was throwing up. And just over and over, this fuchsia, bright colored stuff coming out of his mouth. So, of course, OSHA, we had to immediately stop the class and get everybody out of the class. One student stayed behind to help the other student. I thought that was really very nice of him. But my responsibility was to get everybody out of the class and make sure that the school and the rest of the rooms knew about what was going on in there. And so we got him out, got him down there. Here you go. Found out the class starts at 2. At 12, between 12:30 and 1, he had gone to Taco Bell. And he had eaten a couple of burritos, a couple tacos, and then they have like a raspberry or berry kind of smoothie or icy thing. And it was like 48 ounces. And he drank that. And so that's what we saw, the fuchsia stuff that was coming out, all that. Anyway, that's a problem. Don't go to Taco Bell an hour and a half before you're getting ready to speak. Don't go to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. You're better off not having a whole lot to eat before you speak. That will also help with your anxiety. Audience analysis, which we'll talk about in just a second, is another helpful way to prepare you for that anxiety that you might have. If you know your audience and know your material is going to scratch the audience where they itch, it'll reduce the level of nervousness that you will have, which is really important. Okay, so I want to talk again a little bit about Aristotle. If you remember from video 1, we talked about logos, pathos, and ethos. Sorry, I can't multitask. Good grief. I'm losing my mind. All right, so, but Aristotle's also famous for what's known as the enthymeme. Now, you watched that TED Talk by Andrew Stanton. When he delivered the punchline, there was, if you notice, there was about a 1-second pause before the audience started laughing at the joke. That 1-second pause was when the audience was filling the gap and putting together the information that Stanton had led them to, which made the punchline really funny. Here's what an enthymeme is. Now this will explain it, this will clear it up for you, no problem. You're going to know exactly what an enthymeme is once I give you these two words. An enthymeme is a truncated syllogism. Okay, got it? That cleared it all up for you, right? All right, what's a truncated syllogism? Well, the most common syllogism that there is, you know what it is when I start putting it up here, is if A equals B and B equals C, then what? A equals C. So what does it mean to truncate a syllogism? What does it mean to truncate anything? It means to cut a portion off. So I can truncate any section of this syllogism and you can fill in the gap because A equals B and A equals C, well then you know that B equals C. See that? Truncated syllogism. It's the audience arranging information in such a way that the audience fills in the gap. It's a way of getting the audience to participate in your speech without them knowing that they're participating. So you can do it this way too. If B equals C and A equals C, then what? If A equals... Anyway. I messed that up. Okay, so you can do it this way too. If when you filling it in, A equals B and B equals C, then you know that A equals C. That's the nth meme. So I'll give you two examples of that. Wasn't that fun? Total brain fart there. Anyway, give you two examples. Most of you have seen the Progressive commercials on television, Progressive Insurance and Flo. Flo's pretty famous for doing those commercials. Years ago, there was a commercial where they were in the Progressive showroom, and Flo was talking to some clients over at this end of the stage, and over at the other end of the stage were the two doofuses, or doofi, from the other insurance company. And Flo was showing the client that they have this really cool tool where they can compare your insurance premium rates to every other car insurance company there is. And it flips the numbers and you can see that. And immediately the two doofi over at the other end started jumping up and down going, we have that too, we have that too. And suddenly, poof, their pants burst into flames. And then it pans back over to Flo and her customer, and they're just looking in awe at these two guys that have their pants on fire. And then it pans back over to the other guys, and now their pants are gone, but there's still some smoke smoldering. And one looks at the other and says, no mas pantalonas. I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. He says, no mas pantalonas. And then that's the end of the commercial. Well, that's an enthymeme. What is the commercial saying? The commercial is saying that other insurance companies lie. Liar, liar, pants on fire. They never said liar, liar, pants on fire. They just showed that their pants were on fire. But that's an enthymeme. It's filling in gaps. I have one more example for you. It's an older example. I don't imagine, let's see, I would say based on my in-person classes when I bring this up, out of 20 people, maybe two people have seen this movie. But in 1995, when this movie came out, it was really popular. The first couple of weeks, it grossed over $100 million. It has Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, and Gwyneth Paltrow, back when she was acting and not telling us how to eat food. It had those three people and Kevin Spacey. And it was called Seven. And it was fun because the title of the movie actually looked like this. How many of you, anybody seen Seven? Have you seen Seven?
Oh, yeah.
No? Yes. Incredible movie. Now, let me just warn you. This movie is extraordinarily dark. It's extraordinarily graphic, and it deals with some really kind of nasty stuff, okay? It's about a serial killer who has decided that he's going to kill 7 people based on the 7 deadly sins of the Catholic Church. So pride, gluttony, lust, sloth, and the other 3, whatever. Malice or anger. So, you know, the 7 deadly sins. He's going to, his tableau, his murder tableau in each case is going to depict one of the 7 deadly sins. So I got interested, first of all, I'm interested in theology, and it was a very theological movie, if you know anything about that, which was fascinating to me. I was told by a professor of theology history that I should go and see this movie. He told a bunch of us students to go see it, and we did. We were the only ones, I feel like, that understood the movie right from the very beginning in the movie. Anyway, we thought that was fun. But the movie did great, and it's dark, but it's excellent storytelling. But the movie is a visual enthymeme. It's a visual enthymeme. The director, David Fincher, one of the great directors in Hollywood, made a conscious decision to set up visual enthymemes, and here's how he did it. The very first crime scene that you're introduced to early, very early in the movie, when Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman meet for the first time, they walk into the house, and the director takes you through the crime scene very slowly. You walk through this dark, nasty house, and you finally get into the kitchen, and the kitchen table, and there's a man that weighs 600 pounds, and he's face down in a big bowl of Chef Boyardee canned spaghetti, and he's dead. And so they're looking at him, and there's roaches crawling on the guy and stuff. It's pretty nasty. But then they discover that underneath the table there's a big bucket, and it's filled with vomit, which was nasty. Then they notice that his hands were tied and his ankles were bound. So they're slowly revealing all of this information to you. And then they notice that there's a bruise on his temple. Okay? Ostensibly, later on, they figure out where the killer was pointing the gun at the guy's temple, forcing him to eat Chef Boyardee canned spaghetti until he died, until he burst inside and died. That's what the coroner said. That's how this guy died. He died because he overate. Well, that later on, they find a message in that kitchen later on, a couple days later. The message was gluttony. And so then they knew they had these. Anyway, all of these murders were never actually shown on the screen. I got interested in this rhetorically when I started reading reviews, popular reviews on the movie, and the popular reviewers were saying that the movie was graphically violent. It was horrifically violent. And they kept using the word violent. And I finally realized there really wasn't any violence in the movie. It was horrifically graphic. It was horrifically dark. But there wasn't any violence in the movie. The reason they thought there was violence in the movie was because Fincher had used this visual enthymeme to perfection. What he did was, rather than showing you the murder, he gave you all the information you need to reconstruct in your own mind a narrative of the murder. That made the movie that much stronger and more powerful. One of the other things I remembered reading about these reviews was that the reviewers said audiences are talking about how this movie has haunted them for weeks after they watched it. And I remember thinking, that movie haunted me for weeks after I watched it. It haunted me. It's rare when a movie haunts me, but this movie haunted me. And I'm convinced it's because you were forced by the director, David Fincher, to come up in your own mind with how the person was murdered rather than him showing you. It's kind of like in The Godfather, the first Godfather, when Sonny gets assassinated at the toll booth leading into Manhattan. When he's assassinated, he's shot by about 20 other gangsters with Tommy guns, machine guns. It's a horrifically violent scene. But you saw it, now it's over, you can move on. There is something haunting about a director forcing you to come up with the narrative in your own mind through your own imagination and creativity. That's what the enthymeme is. And it's a powerful way to persuade. It's a powerful way to storytell. It's a powerful way to present orally. So I wanted to make sure that you understood all of that as well. In terms of finding topics, the first rule is do what you know. Andrew Stanton. Use what you know. Andrew Stanton. You can also find topics through whatever is currently hot or trending in internet news websites or on social media. You can also brainstorm with other people. Arizona State University has the best speech team in the nation. They're incredible. When I was on the speech team at Grand Canyon University, if I was not in a round, participating in a round, I would find out where the ASU students were speaking and I would go and watch that round because they were just incredible. Finally, I asked one of them, how do you come up with your topics? Your topics are always so great, so interesting, so insightful. How do you come up with your topics? And they said, we have before the semester even starts, in order to be on the speech team at ASU, you have to arrive for the semester 2 weeks early. And we all gather for that 2 weeks and we brainstorm topics together. And then once we have topics, we help put together the outline of our main points together. Brainstorming is a great way to do that. By the way, for a beginning speaker, for somebody who's new to public speaking, the most common mistake that you will make is not overconfidence, but rather choosing a topic that's too big for the amount of time that you have to speak. Here's what I found with high school and early college students. The idea of giving an informative speech for 5 to 7 minutes, a lot of students say, I don't know where I'm going to be able to find a topic where I could talk about it for 5 to 7 minutes. That seems like a lot. When I was teaching graduate students, here was their number one complaint. They had an informative speech of 10 to 12 minutes that they had to give. Their complaint was, I don't know how I'm going to be able to find a topic that I can limit to 10 to 12 minutes. You see the difference. Brand new, novice, beginning speakers tend to pick topics that are too big for the time that's allowed. You need to learn how to narrow topics, okay? Biggest mistake new speakers make is to try to do a big topic in the time given. I'm going to do a topic on the history of the Ford Motor Company. No, you're not. I'm going to do my informative speech on the history of the Soviet Union. No, you're not. I have had speeches on the history of the Mustang. That's still a pretty big topic if you do it well, but you can still jam it into 7 minutes, but it's narrower than the whole Ford Motor Company. You need to learn how to narrow your topics. You got a big topic, start picking aspects of that topic and narrow it down. So you need to make sure your speech purpose is clear. You have to identify for your audience exactly what you're talking about, why you're talking about it, and how you're going to talk about it. Very, very important. Your purpose statement should be result-oriented. I would like you to know more about this. I would like you to persuade you to see this. Okay? And then, is your purpose realistic? You have to ask that question too. Remember that a thesis, you should know this, a thesis is what the main point or main thrust of your speech or your research paper is. That's the thesis. You need to make sure you have excellent transitions in your speech. We talked about transitions. Transitions look back and look forward. By the way, something else about transitions. If you don't think transitions are important, try telling that to Hollywood. When you watch your serial shows on Netflix or Prime or Hulu or whatever, have you noticed that they like to preview what is coming in the next episode, and then at the beginning of the next episode they review what they just covered in the last episode? Oh wow. It seems as though Hollywood believes in previews and reiterations and transitions. Yes, they do. And if Hollywood believes in it, makes hundreds of millions of dollars from it, maybe we should incorporate it as well. How about testimony as a source? You talk about sources. By the way, you can't use Wikipedia as a source. That's a Maricopa County Community College rule all across the 10 colleges. You can't use Wikipedia as a source. You have to use academic sources. Some of them are going to be just URLs, I understand that, but we check those things. You can't use Wikipedia. However, as many of you probably know, you can use Wikipedia as a way to get to scholarly resources, because very often a Wikipedia essay will have references and links at the bottom that will take you to the University of Kentucky or Stanford University or an essay in the Wall Street Journal or New York Times or whatever. And so that's how you can use Wikipedia, but don't ever cite Wikipedia in your speeches or on your word process, word processed works cited. You can use narratives, stories as a way to substantiate your speech, support your speech. Narratives are a good way to support your speech. Testimonies are a good way to support your speech. Here's a terrible way to support your speech. Lots and lots of statistics. When you're writing a research paper, you can have lots and lots of statistics layered upon each other. That makes sense because when a person's reading something, they can stop and digest it and then move on and see that next layered statistic and digest that in relationship to the previous statistic. Then they can move on and take the next one. But when somebody's listening to a speech, they can't do that. They can't hit the pause button on you. They are listening, and if you're, here you go. Research shows that the most popular pie in America is apple pie. Research also shows that 57% of people who eat apple pie prefer Dutch apple pie to French apple pie. And of the 57% of people that prefer Dutch apple pie to French apple pie, 16% of them put cheese on their apple pie. Okay, by the time you've got to the Dutch and apple part of the statistics, people have checked out. They're not listening to you anymore. They might find it interesting to read, but they're really not listening to you anymore. So don't layer statistics. You can use statistics in a very simplistic way. 90% of people prefer apple pie to pumpkin pie. Boom, that's it, move on. Okay? But testimony as a source. I've had students who have given a speech on firearm use, on policing, things like that. Second Amendment, there's a policy speech for you if you're interested. First Amendment, Second Amendment, all the amendments. But I had one person give a speech on law enforcement, and they had an uncle who was a Phoenix police officer, and she brought him in during the speech for about a 45-second interview and just had him there. That's a form of testimony. If you've ever been watching TV, kind of flipping around on the channels, and you come across those things called infomercials where somebody has bought a half an hour worth of time on a channel in order to tell you about the latest slicer dicer kitchen amazing appliance thing, you know, and they have the person with the white chef's hat on, and they're showing how you can dice and slice anything, and it turns out great, and it's easy to clean and all that stuff. At some point, they will have a testimony in that infomercial. They'll say, let me introduce you to Bob Smith. Bob Smith, come on in. Tell me about your experience with this amazing Ronco slicer dicer. And oh, you wouldn't have believed my life before the Ronco slicer dicer. My life was terrible. I would cut my fingers trying to cut up vegetables, and it took forever to cut the vegetables, and I had to start 2 hours early to cut the vegetables, and then there was a big mess on the countertop, and the vegetables didn't look right, and it was terrible. Then I bought the Ronco slicer dicer, and now my life is wonderful. I put on parties all the time. I'm very popular, and blah, 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 and cleanup is easy, Bob. That's a testimony. So you can use testimony as well. Your speeches must be, talked a little bit about this already, but I'll reiterate it. They must be substantive. You got to go deep. I know the speech is only 5 to 7 minutes. You got to go deep. You got to give us some information. You got to have a good argument. So they need to be substantive, worthwhile. They need to be appropriate. We talked about that. And then they need to be culturally sensitive. It doesn't mean you can't handle hot potato topics, controversial topics. You should handle them, but handle them with grace and dignity. Okay? We talked about speaking extemporaneously. Here's from Cristiano. Speaking extemporaneously is speaking from an outline or notes. The speaker prepares and practices the speech to the point where an outline or notes only serve as a guide to memory. Even when using a sentence outline, the speaker uses the information on the outline as an aid from which the speaker elaborates extemporaneously on the ideas expressed in the outline. Another way to say it is that you're speaking conversationally. Write this down. What is the strongest part of a sentence? What is the strongest part of a sentence? Is it the adjective? Is it the noun? Is it the predicate? Is it the punctuation? Is it the word choice? What is the strongest part of a sentence? The strongest part of a sentence is the verb. The verb. That's where all the action is. Even if the verb is a to-be verb, even if the verb is. The verb is always the strongest part of the sentence. Remember that. So let's talk a little bit about audience analysis. Dwayne Lifton has a book on public speaking. He says it so well. Most audiences are not hostile. Most audiences want you to succeed, but it is the responsibility of your success is still yours. And so you need to understand your audience. You need to ask questions about your audience. Now, obviously, I'm your audience in this class, but when you start presenting out in the marketplace, find out about your audience. Find out the demographics about the audience. Find out about the gender makeup of your audience. Find out about the age makeup of your audience. Find out about the ethnic makeup of your audience. Find out about the education level of your audience. Find out about if you can, the geographical history of your audience members. Find out all of these things because it will help you to direct how you're going to use your content. I was once asked to lead a retreat for a large group of seniors, and I don't mean high school or college seniors. I mean people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I was told that at this retreat there were going to be 78 people. Well, I didn't ask what the gender breakdown was. The gender breakdown went like this: 75 were women, 3 were men. If I had known that, I would have changed the way I directed my content and the way I presented my content, but I didn't think to ask that. That's important. I've given commencement speeches at graduation at Grand Canyon University twice. One was for traditional graduation, so mostly 21, 22, 23-year-olds who had just gotten their bachelor's degree. And then one time was for the continuing education and master's degrees graduation. So now you're talking about people who are 25 to 40 years old, who already have jobs, who have families and stuff. That's a completely different audience than a group of 21 to 23-year-olds who are just getting ready to kind of go out into the marketplace. So I had completely different content for them. I gave a presentation on the 6-step guide to a large conference of, let me see if I can conjure this. So these were people who were certified in being activities directors in assisted living facilities. Did you follow that? So they work for an assisted living facility where families put older people who can't take care of themselves anymore in their apartment or their home. They put them in an assisted living facility with the cafeteria and their room and all that stuff. But they all have activity directors so that they can get all these people in their 70s through 90s together and do activities together and do stuff together. You can get a master's degree certification in that. I was speaking at a conference where there were 400 of these people just from Arizona. 400 of these people had this job in Arizona. I was blown away. I was asked to give a presentation to them. Well, I knew, first of all of them had bachelor's and master's degrees, so that told me something about their education level. I knew that they were primarily women. They were about 78% women. I found that out by talking to the organizer of the conference. I also knew that they all were rooted in a common vocation, so I could kind of direct things there too. Even though I'm giving a presentation on how to give effective public speeches through the 6-step guide. And I was able to do that for them. And so understanding your audience is a really important thing to do. So question the person who invited you to speak about their audience. Research the company or the audience online. Go to the Chamber of Commerce if they're affiliated with the Chamber of Commerce in any way. Attend one of their meetings if you can. I've spoken to Rotary clubs. And so when I'm asked to speak at a Rotary club, I'll attend one of their meetings before so I can get a feel for the audience and for the venue and all of that. Sometimes I'll contact previous speakers. If I know any of the previous speakers, I'll contact them and I'll say, what's it like? So that's really helpful too. Demographics, very, very important in regard to that as well. So make sure that you don't use Wikipedia, transitioning out of audience analysis now. You're not allowed to plagiarize, okay? That will be a question on your quiz. What is the term for when you use somebody else's material but take credit for it? That's plagiarism. It's going to be a fill in the blank on the quiz. Okay? Visual aids, one way to enhance your speech is with visual aids. 3 of your speeches are required to have a visual aid. And with the advances in technology, it's much easier to do it. Here you go. Most of the online COM-225 students now have figured out how to have a video of them speaking while they have their PowerPoint in one of the corners of the screens. I bet you know how to do that, don't you, Noah?
Yes.
So not everybody knows how to do that, but more and more students have figured that out. So that's one way of doing it. But visual aids help people see what you're talking about. But there are some rules about visual aids. First of all, you can't have a lot of text on your visual aids. Don't put an entire paragraph up on a screen in really small font. Because what will happen is people will be trying to read that paragraph while you're talking about something else, and they won't be able to do both at all. They'll miss what you're talking about, and they really absorb what the paragraph says. What you want in visual aids is you want a lot of color, you want a lot of simplicity, and you want bullet points at best. Okay? Visual aids will reinforce your argument. Sorry, I shouldn't have moved that. They gain attention, they reinforce your argument, they help you clarify what you mean. They can build your credibility, that's important too. And also visual aids kind of give your audience a little break. Sometimes an audience needs a break. Most of my presentations are anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour that I do outside of the school. 30 minutes to an hour. Research shows that the audience needs a mental break about every 6 or 7 minutes. In other words, every 6 or 7 minutes, you should tell a story that relates to your content. Don't just go off and start talking about walking your dog on the canal bank and how a fish jumped up or whatever. Has nothing to do with your talk. It has to be related to your talk, but an illustration or a storytelling, something funny, that gives the audience a break. Every 6 or 7 minutes, the audience needs a quick mental break, and then they can come back to the table. So keep your visual aids simple. Make sure people are able to see them. It's so frustrating when you have a visual aid and there's somebody standing in front of it or some obstruction or whatever. I remember when the Arizona Coyotes first got started here, the hockey team, and they were playing in the Suns Arena, and they had all of those obstructed view seats. It was so annoying. I hated those seats. The reason was because the Suns Arena was built with basketball sight lines, not hockey sight lines, and they're very different. It was very frustrating. So don't ever get in the way of your own visual aid, and always double check your visual aid before you start your presentation. We've talked about transition statements. Avoid these pitfalls. Don't ever apologize. Don't ever say something like at the end of, I've had students do this at the end of the speech, well, I wish I could have done better, and then they sit down. Oh, maybe most of the audience didn't know you didn't do that well. Let us decide on that. Don't tell us that. Avoid promising something that you can't deliver. Here you go. This is so important. Don't ever start your speech by saying, boy, I'm really nervous. Because the way the audience receives that is, this is going to be painful. You're already telling your audience that this isn't going to be good. Never introduce new material in your conclusion. We've already talked about that. And don't ever dilute your position. You know, don't end your speech by saying, well, I hope I had enough information. I hope I did okay. I could have done better, whatever. Make sure you finish well, too. So, remember also that the spoken word is different than the written word. Finally, in terms of persuasion, here's the persuasive speaking definition from Cristiano, page 131. It is to convince your audience members to accept your point of view and possibly change their mind and their behavior. Your goal is to influence the audience. Persuasive speeches are likely controversial. If there's no controversy, there's no need for persuasion. Just be careful. So, I want to show you something really important about persuasive speaking. You might have a topic that you're going to try and persuade your audience on, and on a scale of 0 to 10, maybe your audience is at a 1.5 and you're at a 9.5. And you want to move your audience down this scale towards the 9.5, towards where you are. One of the biggest mistakes a speaker makes is they think that in one 10-minute speech they can do this. And you can't. Here's why. Write this down. It'll be on the quiz. Persuasive speaking is incremental. Good persuasive speaking is incremental. It is not emotional. Don't be tempted to answer that quiz question emotional. It's incremental. Here you go. In order to get somebody there, it might take 10 exposures to your position. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, you may not ever get 10 chances at an audience, but other people might fill in some of the gaps. Here's a win. If you have an audience that's at 1.5 and you're at 9.5, and you can move the audience to a 2.0, that's a win because it's incremental. Persuasive speaking is incremental. Here's another thing to consider about persuasive speaking. It's called the theory of confluence. And again, it's really helpful when it comes to persuasive speaking. So here's you, and here's your audience. Okay? And on a particular issue, you're here and your audience is here, but there's this area of confluence right here in the middle where you and your audience overlap and you see things the same way. You have affinity here, you have similarity here, you have agreement here. Again, a mistake that many speakers make is that if they're here and your audience is here, they will start out here and just blast away, trying to get the audience to come over like this. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. What works is starting here, connecting with the audience on your commonalities, and then starting to push the audience incrementally out so that your circles start to overlap a little bit more and a little bit more. That's the theory of confluence. Always start in the middle, not on the edges. That's 200 years theorizing about confluence boiled down to about 45 seconds. Okay? Anything else I need to cover here? I think that's it. I think we've done it. So, again, I reiterate, still early in the semester, but this semester is going to go very fast because it's only 8 weeks in this class. I just reiterate, if you need help, you have questions, you need clarity, please contact me. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Adios.